When I take an honest look at Christianity in the West today, it makes me sad. Church attendance is plummeting, but more than that, a biblical worldview is disappearing, replaced by a widely variable, typically personal, something else view. According to what I've heard, only the tiniest percentage of even church-going people have a biblical worldview, and it's clearly being replaced by something else, even within the church. Why does Christianity feel so broken? Are there stats that quantify what I'm sensing?
Christianity in the West feels broken not because God has failed, but because something living has slowly been replaced with something constructed. George Barna is a Christian pollster who has been monitoring the state of belief within the church for decades. He uses a fairly narrow definition of biblical worldview, but since this definition has remained consistent for decades, the trends he identifies are significant. Only about 4% of adults in the US have a biblical worldview today. In 1994, it was 12%. In 2020, it dropped to 6%. From 2023 to 2026, it has settled at around 4% and remains there. That represents a two-thirds collapse over one generation. Even more striking is what's happening inside the church. Only about 6% of self-identified Christians have a biblical worldview, just 2 percentage points higher than the general population. Among those who identify as born-again Christians, roughly 1 out of 7, or about 14%, have a biblical worldview. In some earlier Barna breakdowns, that number was as low as 9%. There's also a significant gap between belief and identity. About 66% of Americans still identify as Christian, but only 24% qualify as practicing Christians, and only 4% have a biblical worldview. That's a massive disconnect between identity, practice, and the way people actually see reality. Barna's deeper findings help explain why the worldview is collapsing. Only about 14% of self-identified Christians hold a biblical understanding of sin. Around 70 to 75% of Americans believe people are basically good, and 58% say that moral truth is up to the individual. A worldview is like soil. It's what everything grows in, whether we're aware of it or not. No one lives without a worldview. It's impossible. When one disappears, another quietly takes its place. For a long time, Christianity in the West functioned like an ecosystem. Not perfectly, but organically. It shaped how people understood truth, what they believed a human life was for, and how they defined good, evil, beauty, and sacrifice. But over time, something subtle happened. Instead of being lived as a way, Christianity was gradually reduced to ideas to agree with, rules to follow, and institutions to attend. And when something living is reduced to something mechanical, it loses its power to reproduce life. As the lived reality of a biblical worldview fades, it doesn't leave a blank space. It gets replaced. Not usually by one obvious alternative, but by a mix of things. Expressive individualism, the idea that truth is personal. Materialism, the belief that only what can be measured matters. Therapeutic thinking, where feeling good becomes the goal. And digital influence, shaping identity and desire in subtle but powerful ways. Together, these form a new operating system, quietly but completely. So even people sitting in church can be running a different worldview underneath. This is why it feels broken. There's a mismatch. The outer form is still there. Church buildings, language, traditions. But the inner engine, the way people actually see reality, has changed. It's like trying to run an old machine with a completely different fuel. Something feels off because it is. The deeper issue isn't mainly a failure of effort. It's a shift from organic life to constructed religion. Organic faith grows, transforms, and integrates into all of life. Constructed religion gets managed, performed, and compartmentalized. One produces life, the other eventually runs out of it. The running out is happening now, but there is a hopeful note. The fact that it feels broken matters, because it means something in us still recognizes what's real. You don't feel grief over something that was never alive, and throughout history, when things become hollow, they don't always die. Sometimes they get rediscovered, not as a system to maintain, but as a way to live again.
So what led Christianity in the West to the state it is now, and what can be done about it? The faith was once a foundation of the society, and when it was, society was measurably safer, and, it seems to me, more honest and even more innovative and kind.
When you step back and look honestly at Christianity in the West today, something does feel off. Not just smaller, but thinner. It wasn't always this way. There was a time when the Christian faith wasn't just something people believed privately, it was part of the foundation of society itself. It shaped how people understood truth. It shaped law, responsibility, restraint, and dignity. And the results were measurable. Society was, in many ways, safer. People were, generally speaking, more honest. There was a stronger sense of accountability, even when no one was watching. And perhaps surprisingly, it was also a time of tremendous technical innovation. Because a biblical worldview doesn't suppress creativity, it actually fuels it. It teaches that the world is ordered, understandable, and worth exploring. That human beings have purpose. That work matters. That truth is real and can be discovered. So what happened? How do you go from that to what we see today? The short answer is not that Christianity was defeated, it was replaced. Not all at once, not through some dramatic event, but slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. The shift happened at the level of worldview. Christianity moved from being something lived to something managed, from a way of life to a set of beliefs, from something that shaped everything to something that was kept in a compartment. And nature doesn't allow empty space. As the biblical worldview faded, other ones moved in. The idea that truth is personal, that meaning is self-created, and that feeling good is the highest goal. The idea that what can't be measured empirically doesn't really matter. These didn't arrive as a system, they blended together. And over time they formed a new foundation, underneath the old language. So now you can still have churches, you can still have Christian vocabulary. But the underlying operating system has changed, and that's why it feels broken. Because the outer form is still there, but the inner reality is different. So what can be done about it? The answer is not to try harder at maintaining the system, and it's not to win arguments at the surface level. What's needed is something deeper. A return to something organic. Not a return to the past, but a return to what was always meant to be. Because Christianity was never meant to be a structure to maintain. It was meant to be a way of living, rooted in reality, growing from the inside out. The kind of life that reshapes how you see everything: truth, work, relationships, suffering, purpose. That kind of faith doesn't spread primarily through institutions. It spreads the way living things spread, person to person, life to life, quietly, but powerfully. And when it takes root again, the fruit begins to show, not instantly, but steadily. In honesty and responsibility, clarity and courage, and in love that isn't sentimental, but real and sacrificial. So the question isn't just, what happened to Christianity? But what would it look like if it became alive again?